Hello everybody and welcome to Cause and Effect, a show about vetes. Today we are going to talk about the law firm, an archetype which comes in many iterations. We are going to compare the three of the most popular groupings and different strengths and weaknesses which comes with choosing different groups. And we will also, in the end, decide which one is the best. Maybe. Anyhow, I would first like to introduce the targets of my Governed Unaligned. Isak Esbjörnsson Bjärmark and Adam Esbjörnsson. Hello.
Hello.
Hi.
Are you suggesting we're lower cap than you?
Obviously.
But he's a 9 cap, so he's unplayable.
Okay, it's...
Oh.
See what I did there?
Yeah. Funny. Anyhow. Before we begin this day's task, let's talk a little bit about how our Vetes weeks have been. Adam, have you been playing anything this week?
Yeah. I had the regular Wednesday night Vetes, and we actually, for some reason, we managed to play a lot of games. We played until late at night, so we played a lot of games. And yeah, it was fine. I've been on a deck building streak, you might call it. I think for the last 3 or 4 regular game nights I've built 2 new decks.
Cool.
Yeah, and so I feel like maybe this is the inspiration from the EC still in me, but
new archetypes or new decks, or just decks that you put together? New ideas? Or?
Half new ideas, half mostly old ideas, I guess.
Okay.
Most of them not so good though.
Oh, cool. Isak, how have you been doing?
I just played 1 game during our pub game because wasn't too many people there and some had to leave and stuff. And I lost that game, so 1 game of Vetes, 4-player table was over in like 20 minutes for me. So.
Oh, okay.
So nothing cool in particular, but for me it's the complete opposite, the other way around. I haven't built any new decks for what feels like an eternity. So, and especially anything like innovative, or rebuild some old decks. But what? And you, Anders, have you been doing?
Yeah, I've been. I don't have a lot to do during the days. I've been thinking a lot about Vetes. I've built like 7 decks, maybe. Just put together some versions that I didn't have, like put together a decent law firm that I didn't have to put together, and I built some mostly things with disguised weapons, so I can disguise out like a flamethrower and play red check and stuff like that. So I've been
yeah, I've seen on the Swedish Vetes channels on the internet that you've stirred some anger towards Rutschrick.
Yeah, some players feel that's an unfair card. I don't know. I think it's a bad card, kind of, actually, because it takes up a master face. But I don't know.
It's very rewarding though, I guess.
Yeah.
Playing Rutschrick and then doing some other shenanigans.
Yeah, it's funny. And then grave robbing and just doing some shenanigans. Anyhow, that's not that's not what we're going to talk about today. Today we are going to talk about the law firm deck, which I feel
Can't they include disguised weapon, flamethrower, grave robbing?
Not so much.
It's not bad.
Because the lack of
Queen Anne, goddammit.
Queen Anne, Erica,
Marcus, Lucinda.
I think we got something here. Catherine de Bois.
Lucinda also have a rush.
Yeah, okay, so we're halfway through. We'll come back to you guys on that. And so let's go back to the more classic law firm. What, Adam, do you feel defines a law firm?
Well, it's the kind of half-half combination of bleeds and boats at no extra stealth. I think that's the that's the important part of a law firm, or that's what brings them all together. So you vote and bleed with many actions, and you might not get all of them through, but you multi-act mostly through Majesty to eventually get some actions through. I think that's like the core of it.
Okay. Isak, what are your experience with that type of deck?
I've played some. Mostly it's against. It's really strange archetypes that can get so locked down by just a few intercept cards. Like just someone having slight intercept can be detrimental for them. But if there's no one with that slight intercept, it gets really strong. I mean, I've seen law firms ditch out some 25 pool damage in a single turn or somewhere in that area, with what seems to be not that big of a problem.
And it shouldn't be. I don't think that's like unrealistic, given some setup and well, no blocks. 25 full damage should be workable, and that's like, I think that's the strength of it.
Yeah. It reminds me of something the Extrala wrote about his feelings about the deck building in this last year's EC. It's a lot of payload, but not any deliverance.
Yeah, sure. Are you sure he said deliverance?
I don't know.
Isn't that some kind of religious term?
No. Okay. My English. So, you know. Okay. Anywho. So, but I mean, if they are so bad at doing stuff, why are they so good? Hold on.
Well, that thing that locks them down is kind of hard to reach. It requires a lot of blocks at one intercept. So, in some situations, they are. It's simply not realistic for players to bounce them or block them enough to survive. So it's just a huge amount of actions, really, that gets around most people's defenses, or most decks' defenses, I should say.
Okay.
But you also have to get to that critical amount. You have to get 3-4 vampires into play to actually start getting that okay, I don't care if you block me situation, because that's where you want to end up. So if you have your first few actions blocked, they can be really detrimental, especially if those actions are Governor Superior, the 4th edition accounting, Superior on Kindred, or those kinds of action, or even Marianne's special ability. It's going to be really detrimental, but if that happens later on, when you have 4, possibly 5 minutes in play, then it can lose 1 out of 10, 12 actions, and then it doesn't really matter that much.
So in what's the type of meta when you should bring your law firm deck then, Isaac?
I'd say it's a pretty all-around deck. That's one of the strengths. It has the ability to deal with a lot of high-end decks. And you can design it depending on what you think of the meta. So you can have uncoiling to deal with unmasking, a lot of entrancement, and that way you can get around some ally rush deck. But the one thing that you really can't deal with is some sort of dedicated Auspex weenie.
Yeah.
So animalism rushes you will deal with kind of well, because you have a lot of majesties, because they were part of your engine, and you could possibly take out a lot of the high cap decks, because you have possibly have Mind Nub in your deck. Mind Nub is a really strong card when it comes to facing Axinia the Clow or Erika or Lutz von Hohenzollern or vampires like that. But it's a combination of things that I think makes you lose. You get both locked, and there's someone who has slight blocking, and you don't draw your Mind Nub. Or there are a few combinations, then you end up being really bad.
Yeah. So to expand on what Isaac said there, Adam, when should you leave your law firm at home, or don't bring it to the table when you're expecting what type of meta?
I feel like maybe defensive metas are hard to bring a law firm into, because of the explosive amount of damage you can do with the law firm. A lot of the game wins come from quickly rounding up the remaining victory points. It's like, okay, now everyone is at sub 10 pool. Let's just take these, I don't know, if it takes 6 actions to win the game from that point. But if people are playing defensively, say with lots of pool or avoiding pool damage, lots of pool gain or avoiding pool damage, very a lot. And I shouldn't say that meta in it's not a deck meta. It's more of a player attitude meta.
Okay.
If people are playing aggressively and an aggressive style, I think it's better to have this deck because it kind of capitalizes on people risking a bit.
Okay, but I mean, I think because it's obviously it has the tools that we will see to also, as Isak said, be able to bring down a wall. You have the Daring the Dawn, and you have so many actions. I mean, isn't it good even in a defensive meta as well?
Oh, well, I think you can always get the one victory point because of how aggressive the deck is. You should be able to bring praise down. But it's really hard if you need to do a huge sequence of actions to bring one prey, and then you need to do the same thing for the next prey.
Okay.
I think that's like it costs a lot of cards to multi-act through Majesty. For instance, you play one action which fails, and then you play another action which might also fail because you don't have any stealth. It takes a lot of cards, so it's hard to make a deck that can actually break 3 defensive players.
Yeah.
And you don't only lose cards, you also lose blood, a lot of blood, and possibly pool as well, because you need to get other vampires into play to get more actions, to get to play more cards, and then you end up in a situation where you will always get your parrot shift blocked, so you'll be very low on pool, because they know that eventually the parrot shift will come, and that is the one thing that it will save themselves for, the parrot shift, so you don't steal 5 from them.
This is my own observation that I've seen a lot less of the law firms since the introduction of Villain and people starting playing more of the inner circles because it's more harder to get the votes through. Is that something you experienced, Isak?
Yeah, or put it like this, I think law firm for a very long time have been at more or less its peak. Like, it was perfected somewhere many years ago, and that one is a really strong archetype because it had high damage throughput, that had a decent defense both towards speeds and combat and stuff like that. But as you stated, as Villain was released and the mentality towards fatty decks were changed, a lot of people realized that you can actually bring up 2, 3 or somewhere in that area inner circle members, and then you vote lock everyone, and then it includes law firms, and then they lose. If each vampire can do one bleed and 1 vote, and if that vote doesn't matter, then you end up with half as many aggressive actions with your law firm, and then you end up being basically toothless. You end up being a stealth bleeder with no stealth.
Yeah.
So yay, you go bleed, and then Majesty untap and do kind, which will never pass anyways. So
even if it does pass, it requires something like 2 vote push cards, or making a really weird deal, or it cuts into the rest of your performance if you try to force it to work.
Yeah.
If you include extra vote push, for instance.
Yeah. But even though maybe this deck or archetype has had its glory days, it's still a good archetype, right?
Yeah, it's. I think it used to be ridiculously strong. Now it's just a good deck, in the way as a mid-cap Kindred Spirits deck is a good deck, or I don't know, Malkavian 94 is a good deck, but it's not ridiculously good. It's okay. And with the right seating and with a really skilled player, you can do wonders with it.
So, any initial thoughts before we go in, or any other thoughts before we go in analyzing the different 3 different crypts, which we're going to talk about? Adam?
Not really. I think we'll cover everything interesting.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then let's jump into it, so to say, and we'll start with the most classic incarnation of the deck, which is the law firm group 1 and 2, of course. And Adam, what are we looking at?
Yeah, it's the group 1-2 law firm, to put it simply. Not all of these have votes, all of them but Heather, Florent and Rania Rishi has votes. And it's Ivan Marin Rivas from earlier this year won a Stockholm tournament with it. Yeah, and I think it's really straightforward. It has some modern twists, if you want to call it that. Say including Heart, including Legendary Vampire, and a few modern twists on it. But other than that, I think it looks really similar to how this deck might have looked. I don't know, 10 years ago.
Okay. So let's start with the Crypt. Isaac.
So basically, you picked not all titled Ventrus that exist in Group 1-2. There's no Sohaila and there's no Queen Anne. Sohaila being really crappy vampire for this particular Crypt because she lacks both presence and fortitude. And you don't have Queen Anne, which is kind of surprising because in most cases I consider her stronger than Democritus because of plus speed and stuff. But yeah, so you have, and you double up on the good ones. William Wahlberg not being that good maybe, but Timothy Crowley, Sabort Nash, Emerson Bridges, Awesome. They all share Superior Dominate in this group. Every single one of them, of the titled vampires, and all of them share Superior Presence, which is brilliant. Yeah, sorry.
I have a question. This deck does not include any Crypt Acceleration.
No, it doesn't.
And most law firm doesn't. Isn't like more common to start with Amazon Bridges and then work your way downwards from that in a Governor Allied staircase sort of deal?
I would call that more modern. I would say this way of playing it is a bit more old school. But yeah, playing with Emerson Bridges as the Star Vampire is absolutely valid, and it might even be better.
Yeah, when you're not featuring any Crypt Acceleration because of the fast pace of the game these days.
Yeah, exactly. But yeah, this is more. Even though just won this year a few times, I think it's. Yeah, so that's the Crypt basically. These are very straightforward vampires. Democritus have this contest thing, which sometimes turns out great. Most of the time, it doesn't really matter that much. William Wahlberg's contest thing is just crap.
What is this contest?
Yeah, but if you contest his title, you pay 2 blood. It's like,
ow.
Okay, when someone from Berlin turns up, it's like, whatever. But the strength of this Crypt is that every single vampire that's titled have Superior Dominate, except for one. Sorry, every single one has Superior Presence, and Superior Presence being key because, as we touched on, the engine in getting so many actions is Majesty.
Yeah,
and it doesn't hurt that 4 out of the titled vampires also have Superior Fortitude, so you can take the punch for one and then do Superior Freak Drive afterwards and just go on with your life.
Yeah.
But my main thing is that if you get blocked, you do want to be able to take an action after that.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the master package. As we touched with no Crypt Acceleration, but they do include other stuff. Adam?
The first easiest part, or most straightforward part, is the Euro Stealth, as it's been so lovingly called. 2 of each of the tap and block denial monsters. And it's just the oust engine. Of course they should be there. That's how you set up an oust. So that's not so much to talk about. Yeah. But it's interesting to me, a few of the choices. Say Dreams is not that weird. It's a good card.
Yeah. Anyway.
Venture Headquarters very prominently featured in law firm decks.
Tap to get 3 votes? Or?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Tap to get 3 votes. Reusable, of course. Direct Intervention, it's a defensive card. You can play it. It might, if you're a really good decision maker, it can really turn the table in your favor.
Decision maker.
Decision maker. I don't know. Yeah. Maybe you're not allowed to make up words like that.
I don't know if that's the English word, but I like it.
Nowadays,
Swedish of you to use that word. So
Yes.
yeah.
But the ones I think are the most interesting is Legendary Vampire, which is you play it on a recently transferred out vampire, and that vampire gains +2 bleed as well as 2 more votes.
Yeah. A few years ago, I built a deck surrounding Legendary Vampire without noticing its unique aspects of the card, and just like, oh, why doesn't people use this more? And then, yeah, it's that. It's because of that.
it's like the Art of Pain deck.
Yeah. I felt hurt by it. Anyhow, I'm not that smart, so you guys know that. Yeah, go on, Adam.
I think it's an well, of course, this is a bleed and vote deck, a card which gives you plus bleed and plus votes. It's good, of course, but the requirement is kind of steep. You had to be recently transferred out, and as well as capacity above 6.
Yeah, it's just one off the Legendary Vampire. I mean, it's more common to see like 3 maybe.
Yeah. Most of the time, if you play Legendary Vampire in your deck, it's most of the times like, okay, I'm gonna want my Legendary Vampire, and thus I need to have it on my hand when I've transferred out vampires.
And of course, it's a age requirement as well.
Yeah, over 6.
Yeah.
So you can't just transfer up Ranya Rishi late game with 2 governs. And then play it. It needs to be someone which is a bit more of an investment. It's still just one card, so it's not like I think it's a bad deck building choice. It's just I think it's an interesting one.
Yeah.
Interesting meaning bad.
No, I'm not that close-minded.
Yeah, you were before the show when we looked at the deck. You said something about the Giant's Blood. I mean, to me, that's just, of course, you have to have a Giant's Blood in your deck, maybe 2. What do you feel about that?
I think it's more interesting your opinion on the why do you say that? Why do you think the Giant's Blood is a given inclusion?
Yeah, because of course, specifically because it's so strong, and you need to be able to play it as fast as possible, so nobody else can play it. And even if you just gain 1 blood, you can't like sit and hog on your Giant's Blood, because someone else might just gain 5 blood, and that would be the end of your game.
Yeah, well, that's my opinion as well.
Yeah.
I think it's interesting. In this deck, you might not include Giant's Blood, because it's like, I have no real reliable way of losing blood, or using blood, I should say. You might end up using 3 blood 1 turn, and then play Giant's Blood for 3 blood. But you don't have Villain, for instance. So obviously it's a lot stronger in Villain decks, but I think the advantage of denying others playing their Giant's Blood is extremely powerful. And it still includes Cap 10, Cap 9 vampires, so every now and again you get to play it on a Democritus in Torpor, and that's extremely powerful, obviously.
So, Isak, why doesn't this deck include any Villains?
You can't play with Villains, because as I touched on earlier, that is very blood intense to play any sort of law firm deck. So bleed cards, most of them in this deck cost blood, Mind Up costs blood. Every time you get blocked, you play Majesty, that costs 1 blood, or you play a Freak Drive, that costs 2 blood. You get hit for 1, at least 1, and then you get. And then you have conditionings, and then Daring the Dawn, which results in rescue attempts. You have deflections, the tradition. So you waste a lot of blood when you play this. I'm actually more surprised that he opted to go for vote captivation rather than some sort of blood gain special. Blood gain master cards like the Coven, Liz Blessing, Life in the City. Because what we touched on earlier, can be very difficult to vote lock with this deck. And vote captivation isn't really that good if you only pass votes by 1, 2, and possibly 3. It's when you go upwards toward 5, 6, 7, and 8 votes passing that vote caps gets really strong.
Okay. So, what are the other key cards, in your opinion, Isak?
In this deck specific, or in general?
Yeah, let's do this deck.
Okay, let's do general. So
okay.
Now, it gets really weird. In general, the paired ships are very important. For for keeping the flow of guys up. That's a general law firm card really included, which is kind of surprising as well as only 3 of them. But for this deck specifically, the voter captivation, as I talked about earlier, and the bewitching oration, and the 13 political action cards maybe doesn't sound like a huge deal, but there are actually quite a lot of votes, especially if you consider law firm, which is typically a low vote deck. So these 2 gets to be, for me, gets to be a little weird. It's like, okay, bewitching oration, 2 of them, that means that if you're vote blocked, you get to pass 2 of your 13 votes. Is it meant to be a combo? You want to draw your vote captivation at the same time as you draw your bewitching oration, that combo yielding 4 blood? I really don't have any good answers. I guess it performed good enough because it won a tournament, but it doesn't feel that strong. Actually, the other way around. It feels a bit weak. Because you have so many action modifiers in this deck. It's like 28 of them. It's ridiculous. 26, sorry. So it's a lot of them.
So you say that's a non-standard way of playing the law firm?
It might be standard, but I think it's suboptimal to play that many action modifiers.
Adam?
More specifically, I feel like maybe the ratio between Freak Drives and Majesty is a bit weird. Because as Isaac says, multi-active with Freak Drive is very inefficient compared to Majesty. It costs 2 blood instead of 1 blood if you're blocked, and you have nothing to avoid being blocked with this deck. There's no certainty that you get your actions through. So Majesty is, in a lot of cases, just straight up better. Obviously, Freak Drive is for when your action wasn't blocked.
Yeah.
But I still feel like there should be more Majesties than Freak Drives in a law firm. This might be a more of a indication of how the Stockholm meta was at that time or at that tournament. Maybe there wasn't much block, and he got all his actions through. And then Freak Drive is a lot better than Majesty, obviously, because it's actually usable. But obviously you're gonna win with the law firm if you've never been blocked with 9 Freak Drives. So I feel like it's a bit of an okay, if my prediction of the meta is correct, I'm gonna win this by a landslide. Yeah. But if the prediction of the meta is off, you're gonna sit there and lose a lot of blood that you didn't need to use for the same thing as a Majesty could have been used for.
Okay, so the reaction package then, because you mean, as we said, this costs a lot of blood playing this deck. How do we feel about the second edition domain, Adam?
Seconds in law firms, I feel it requires a lot of blood to be usable. And this deck does not have that blood gain engine. It's 1 Giant's Blood as well as 3 vote captivations. That's all the blood gain you're ever gonna get. Yeah. So in this specific deck, I don't like it. You can play second edition in law firms in general if you include more blood gain, in my opinion.
Okay. And that's because you play second edition when you're tapped 9 cases out of 10. That's 1 blood. And you get hit for at least 1 or play a Majesty for 1. So that's each second edition is 2 blood, which is a lot. Really is a lot. And and it's
yeah.
Yes.
So
good talk.
So a little bit more about how the strategy. How do you play the game? The deck, Adam?
Turn up the fattest guy, play governance and scouting missions until you have no more possibility to play governance and scouting missions superior. And when you have all the vampires out, you can get you start to in the most efficient way that you predict your prey will be ousted. You try to do that. In some cases, it's waiting and not doing something at all. Say if you use 2 actions for something, and then it's like, okay, I have 2 actions spare. Sometimes you'll want to use them to use up your prey's resources, and in some other cases you want to stay untapped to make your prey clog his hand, so you get an easier time the next turn. So that part is kind of from a case-to-case basis, but if you want to say in some general terms, it's just finding a good way of ousting your prey. But yeah, but it comes. This deck or the law firms are really weird when ousting, and it is really situation specific. It's not as easy as play your bleed cards, play your stealth cards. You need to think a bit more than that.
And you constantly have in the back of your head, how many majesties have I used up? How many freakers have I used up? How many of my bleed actions have I used up? And how many of my bleed modifiers are used up? And how many of my vote cards are used up? Because you need to be constantly aware of that you have that 1 bleed action attempt and that 1 vote attempt per minion. And you need to keep that the most efficient. So you don't end up like bleeding 2 times with your only 2 princes. Both of them end up being successful, and then you start drawing into a lot of parry shifts, for instance.
Yeah.
So we constantly have to have the back in your head, what is the most probable card for me to draw within the next between 5 and 10 cards, depending on how many minions you have in play, and start playing with that in the back of your head, and constantly challenging your plan. Oh, I draw this card, that means I need to rethink my entire plan and do this instead. Oh, it was this then. Okay, back to play plan A, drop plan B. Okay, I draw this card, now plan C. And just constantly changing depending on what you draw and depending on which of your action gets blocked and which doesn't get blocked.
Is this also like general when playing multi-act?
This is multi-act when you want to get blocked. And that is for me, one of the defining factors of a law firm.
Yeah.
You play multi-act that only multi-acts, or basically only multi-acts when you get blocked. You use multi-act as a way of getting your actions through. So you actually know that of your 17 actions plus 13, these 30 actions, 10 or 15 of those are going to be blocked.
Yeah.
So
you have actually a concrete thing that I think is good to think about. If you have a freak drive on hand, but you don't have a majesty, it's better to vote, because it's a stealth action and it's easier to... You're more likely to get that action through. And if you have a majesty on hand, but not a freak drive, it's better to bleed.
Yeah.
Because it's a stealth action, it's more likely to get blocked. And then you get to use your majesties and freak drives in the most efficient possible way.
Yeah. Really good, Adam.
Thank
if you're expecting to get blocked, play a scary card first, and then play an even scarier card.
Yes. Always the second scariest first.
Yes.
But sometimes you want to play the scariest first, so they think that is the second most scariest, and then they elect not to block it. So you do the double Nurkish lie.
Yes, it's all about mind games, playing these types.
Yeah.
Getting people to try and block the wrong thing, and then play a Daring the Dawn and win. So typically, how many vampires do you think you should be able to use or utilize with this deck, Isak?
Sorry, I missed the question.
How many vampires do you play? How many vampires do you get out? How many do you get out? All 4? So do you just satisfied with 3 or 2?
You're never satisfied. That's point A. You constantly want to bring out new minions, and one of the driving factors for that is one, of course, all other players are doing that, so you need to get along. It's the thing of the month. It's new black, etc. But the other thing being that you start to empty your vampires off. They run out of blood. You get fresh vampires in play. That's fresh blood, and that's more actions for you to do. In the end, you will end up with vampires that are really, really tired, just 0, 1, or 2 blood, and then you have to be really careful, and then you lose the ability to multi-act.
Yeah.
So if you manage to find the opportunity to govern superior, do that. If you manage in turn 3 or 4, pay 1 to see and 1, you have that 1 turn where you can't make 4 transfers to a new vampire. Buy 1 preemptively, because in turn 7 you do want to turn the next vampire up, and that is also why you almost always see the law firms with 3 or 4 or somewhere in that area sidekicks with a capacity of 5 or 6 or somewhere around, some mid cap, just to have something extra to bring out that can call most votes and can do all the bleed actions.
Okay, so in the next part we are going to analyze the 2 other types of law firms which are out there and are usable and good. And we will probably make some jokes. Adam has promised to sing a song, so it will be awesome. So stay tuned for the part 2.